In Starman, Bowie describes the moment when the kids first hear Ziggy on the airwaves, and portrays the thrill of encountering a new musical experience, something that is alien to the rationality of the culture you grew up in. Lady Stardust does the same, but describes the moment of seeing the new act perform on stage. And it adds two more important ingredients to the story. First, it gets deeper into the phenomenon of the crowd's reaction, and tries to understand what causes it. Secondly, it provides us with a clue to one of the traits of the Ziggy character, one of the things that make him an alien. As with any other track on the album, this one can be understood both ways, as a standalone piece and as part of the bigger story. In itself, the record seems to be inspired by a very special moment in pop history, the moment glam rock broke big. The glam sensibility has been fermenting since 1970, inspired by Warhol via the Velvet Underground, and developed in England by the two friendly rivals David Bowie and Mark Bolan. Both of them have been going through the same phases since the mid-60s, but up to 1972, Bolan was always a step ahead. Trendier as a mod, freakier as a hippie, flashier as a glam rocker. In his hippie phase, he was a cult figure, catering to the flower children's yearn to escape the realm of science into the realm of magic, by providing Tolkien-esque fairy tales of wizards and elves, sung in a dreamy voice with folksy acoustic backing. But when hippie magic started to wither away, Bolan joined Bowie in the quest to reconnect to the roots of early rock and roll, and draw imagery not from Fantasyland, but from a futuristic space age. His lyrics were still surrealistic, but the landscape was now an urban landscape. The images were now rock and roll images, in other words, cars and girls. The music was rhythmic and electrified, and the vocals charged with sexual energy and prowess. Tyrannosaurus Rex, his cult band, now became T-Rex, a stomping monster oriented towards making smash hits, and in March 1971 they were scheduled to appear on Top of the Pops to perform their new single, Hot Love. And appear they did, with Bolan adorned in a shiny silver suit and a touch of glitter under the eyes, bringing back the glamour into rock and roll. It doesn't look very shocking when you watch it nowadays, but against the backdrop of the unglamorous, macho, denim-clad world of early 70s rock, he came over like a radiant androgynous figure, sending a jolt of excitement through many teen viewers. Within weeks, the streets were colonized by kids who mimicked Bolan's style, and the era of glam was upon us. Bowie, as always, took notes and internalized. And so, even before he had his own Top of the Pops moment, with Starman, he already prophesizes the reaction he would generate, by writing a song inspired by Mark's big moment, and making it part of the Ziggy Stardust saga. Lady Stardust is that song.
People stare at the makeup on his face, laugh at his long black hair, his animal grace, the boy in the bright blue jeans jumped up on the stage. Lady Stardust sang songs of darkness and disgrace.
Once again, Bowie is analyzing the moment when human beings encounter something that is alien to their rationality. Rock and roll, when it broke in the 50s, went against every notion of musical quality, and was laughed at and scolded by culture guardians, who regarded it as a primitive form of music. But there was also fear. The sudden appearance of this primitive, animalistic form of music went against the notion that we are continuously progressing away from our animal roots, and thus threatened to expose the whole rationality of progress as erroneous. This is why the culture guardians were so perturbed by it, and tried to ridicule it and shut it up, but the kids didn't care. They knew rock and roll gave them more joy than anything else, and they didn't have to explain it rationally. By the late 60s, however, rock also began to think of itself in terms of quality and progress, and moved away from its rock and roll roots. Bowie, through Ziggy, brings rock and roll back, with a rereading of what rock and roll does. The ecstatic joy did not come from a retreat to animalism, but because this animalism was alien to the rationality of the 50s and liberated the kids from it. Rock and roll, in other words, is a liberating force that smashes the rationality of your old world and gives you that special thrill of breaking loose. So, to revive rock and roll, you must find a way to come over something that is alien to the rationality of your time, and this is exactly what Bolan did. In his long black hair, in his makeup and glitter, he looked effeminate, confusing the very strict gender lines. Androgyny, then, is the way to go, and Bowie appropriates it to his own means. The description he gives here fits Bolan to a T, documenting the moment when he made his initial ripple, but at the same time it switches the story towards our hero, Ziggy Stardust. Referring to him throughout as a male, but calling her a lady, it suggests that this is a creature of dubious sexuality, which does not fit any sexual category in our current rationality, and thus threatens to show this entire rationality as erroneous. As always, most people reject this alien, reacting with fear and ridicule. The fear was mentioned in Starman. Here, we encounter the ridicule.
Spent towns emerged from shadows to watch this creature there. Boys stood upon their chairs to make their point of view.
But not everybody is laughing. There are those who find in the alien something that reflects what they feel inside, something they can identify with. Bowie characterizes Ziggy's crowd. It is made from boys, teenagers who feel alienated from the world they grew up in, and femme fatales, a term that immediately evokes the Velvet Underground classic, and can stand for all the other urban misfits in the records of this New York band. All those persons now come out of the shadows and make their point of view. Another clever Bowie pun, which can mean that they want a better view of the performer, but also that they can now finally express what they feel inside, given a voice by Ziggy.
I smiled sadly for a love I could not obey. Lady Stardust, their songs of darkness and dismay.
Suddenly, the narrator makes his own presence known, and we learn that he, too, was among this crowd. But he reacts differently from all the others. He does not mock the alien, but he does not let himself be swept away by him/her either. He does feel that this creature kindled something inside him, but he cannot obey this inner feeling, and remains in the capacity of observer to the whole affair. What is that love that he feels inside, and why does he feel like he cannot obey it? Don't worry, we will have our answer by the end of the record.
And it was all right. The band was all together. Yes, it was all right. The song went on forever, and he was up all night. Really quite paradise on his side. All night long.
It is part and parcel of rock and roll mythology. When rock and roll first broke, it suddenly seemed like time stopped moving forward, and instead became an eternal cycle of joy. Every new moment brought a new thrill, the options to explore seemed endless, and life became a 24-hour party. You can hear this sentiment in early rock and roll records like Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock and Chuck Berry's Around and Around. But then the rock and roll moment faded, time resumed its forward motion, and life was once again a drag. The memory lingered, though, and youth culture always dreamed of returning to that magical moment. Ziggy, now, comes to revive it once again, to stop time and plunge the youth into non-stop partying. This point in the album was supposed to feature his rendition of Around and Around, telling us how the joint started rocking once Ziggy came on, and just wouldn't stop. The track was eventually edited out, but it doesn't matter, because the chorus of Lady Stardust says it all. The appearance of this out-of-sight musical alien seems to lock us in a magical circle where the song just goes on forever, and we find ourselves in a paradise of ultimate joy. In Soul Love, Bowie spoke of his need for love, and how he does not know how to attain it, and can only hope for it to descend on him. Well, Ziggy now shows us that love can also be willfully generated. When you find a way to embody something inside you that heretofore could not be expressed, you provide anyone who suffered from the same repression with something they can identify with. And once they do, they all assume a collective identity and unite in a mutual bond. The band was all together, sings our narrator. But it's not just the band. Everyone touched by Ziggy now comes together, and find themselves to be part of a bigger whole, an all-embracing love. So by being androgynous, Ziggy touched something inside a few kids and misfits, helping them come out of the shadows. What is this repressed trait inside of them, which this alien now liberates?
Oh, how I sighed when they asked if I knew his name.
It's the sigh that gives it away. In Two Loves, a poem written by Lord Alfred Douglas, Uranian poet and Oscar Wilde's special friend, the hero dreams of standing in a strange garden where he has a brief erotic encounter with a young lad. Then, two figures promptly appear, one of them singing beautiful and joyous songs about love between boy and girl, the other just sighing sadly. The hero asks the silent one, "What is thy name?" And the latter replies, "My name is Love." But the other figure immediately intervenes and contradicts him, claiming that I am true love. I fill the heart of boy and girl with mutual flame, while the other one's name isn't love, but shame. To which the sad one sighs again, and says, "Have thy will, I am the love that dare not speak its name." The sad figure, then, represents a kind of love that isn't between a boy and a girl, but is still love. What is the nature of that other love? The love that dare not call itself love, dare not sing its own songs, because it is not allowed to do so by the more dominant kind of love. To the prosecutors in Oscar Wilde's trial, and they were most probably right, there was no doubt. It is homosexual love, asking to be recognized on the same level as heterosexual love. This was, of course, out of the question in Victorian England, and continued to be so into the 20th century. But by invoking that infamous poem, Bowie now tells us who Lady Stardust truly is. She is the voice of that other love, which finally found a way to sing its own songs. Not allowed to sing beautiful love songs, she focuses on the dark side of human existence, singing about disgrace and dismay, but by so doing, she provides a turf for that other kind of lovers to get together. The narrator is still bound by the old conventions, still sighing instead of calling his feelings by name, still not daring to obey his homosexual love. But on the stage in front of him, and in the crowd's reactions around him, the conventions are breaking down, and we are entering a new world. Lady Stardust, then, introduces us to one of the traits that make Ziggy an alien, his bisexuality. It has a few levels. On one level, it is simply a continuation of the 60s sexual revolution. The hippies said, "Make love, not war," and lived up to their credo by practicing free love. That is, as much sex as possible. Ziggy now comes to traverse more boundaries, and make love even more global and free. His inaudible muttering in the end, which sounds something like, "Get some pussy now," suggests that this is merely the next step in rock and roll's insatiable quest for the next sexual adventure. But it is also a revolution. Ziggy embodies an identity that couldn't exist before, an identity that went against the rationality of the time. This rationality defined each gender in strict terms, and had very definite ideas on what is masculine and what is feminine. If a boy displayed feminine traits, or a girl masculine traits, They were regarded as unnatural and needing a cure. But many girls and boys had traits that did not fit into the neat roles of the dominating rationality, and they had to hide these traits, hide their true nature. Ziggy now blends feminine and masculine together, presenting an identity that contains both, and enables those kids to break away from oppression and live out what they feel inside. And, of course, he is also giving a voice to that love that dared not speak its name, to homosexual love. Homosexuality was also considered unnatural and forced to hide, but Ziggy wears it on his sleeve with pride, and encourages others to do the same. In the subculture that developed around Ziggy, they can sing their own songs at last. Finally, Ziggy's bisexuality can be understood on an aesthetic level as well. There is an old tradition in Western thought that regards the male as the one who stamps his own form into things, and the female as the formless clay who is being stamped. Rock music followed this tradition, demanding that its male singers would present an original identity and impose it on the world. Ziggy obeys this demand, but Bowie understood that there is no such thing as a completely original identity. Everyone learns from others, and originality means appropriating what you've learned and creating something new out of it. In other words, you must first let others lay their form on you and be impregnated by them, before you can create a new form and lay it on others. Ziggy, then, is a bisexual type of artist, holding both the female part of being stamped by someone else and the male part of stamping his own form on the world. Lady Stardust is the record that puts forth this novel aesthetic approach. The reigning perception of art contended that every artist has a unique vision, which stems from his unique self, and he should spend his entire career developing that vision, and growing the self in the process. But Bowie's perception regards the self not as a growing thing, but as a thing that is periodically reborn through transformations, and so he uses his art to create these transformations. At the beginning of every transformation there's this moment when he encounters an alien performer, and feels a strange fascination, an inner attraction. His rationality tells him that this is a love that he cannot obey, that this alien is all wrong, but he tells us that we should indeed obey this love, because we will be reborn in the process. On one level, this record is about how Bowie was reborn when he saw Mark Bolan, and was transformed by him. On another level, it is about how the kids are reborn when they let themselves be transformed by Ziggy. On the third level, this is the blueprint for Bowie's entire career, a career built on constant transformations, achieved through emulating alien forms of art.